Good afternoon. Welcome to Community and Technology, where we connect the global community with news, information, and resources that will help improve your life. I'm Stu Reed. Here's my co-host, Dave Bernstein. Hey, Dave.
Hello. Anything happened this week?
Well, there was just a recent announcement, Supreme Court decision. Surprised a lot of folks. They upheld $8 billion fund for internet and phone service called the Universal Service Fund. This is a fund that all the major carriers contribute to on an annual basis. And the history and purpose of the fund is it was originally to support universal telephone service, back I think in the 30s or so when it was first instituted. And since then, it's been used purportedly to help ensure broadband service throughout the states. And many folks, Republicans in particular, were trying to kill it. And the Supreme Court surprised folks with a 6-3 ruling that said the FCC was within their purview to collect fees from the telecom companies to pay for the Universal Service Fund. That's the good news. Now, the not so good news, Dave, is that fund continues to shrink. Originally, it was funded mostly by interstate telephone calls, long distance calls, which, as you know, uh, virtually disappeared. Dwindling amount of money coming from that source. And so the Universal Service Fund has continued to shrink over the years. And in addition to that, some of the programs that the FCC had put together, in particular, the Affordable Connectivity Program, ACP, which we've talked about on the show before, was killed. Well, I should say was not renewed by Congress when it expired about a year or so, year and a half ago. So although USF, Universal Service Fund, is still alive, it's not quite well, and it is seems to me from what my reading is not really delivering on the promise to provide affordable broadband directly to homes and schools and libraries across the country. So good news in that the rubric is still there. Not so good news in that the fund continues to shrink and that there does not seem to be much of will on the part of the FCC to use that fund to help stimulate broadband adoption.
Oh, we got a story about that coming later in the show about what the FCC just did.
Yeah.
Well, I, well, first, let me explain what the suit was about. It had nothing to do with the substance of the Universal Service Fund or how it was spent. Our Constitution says that bills to raise money must start in the House of Representatives, and the lower courts agreed with that because the Universal Service Fund was set up and the regulations set by the FCC, not by the House of Representatives.
Mm-hmm.
And as you say, there were Republicans who wanted to get rid of some parts of it, help support this lawsuit. And they took the technicality as a way to get rid of it. And courts often go along with that. In this case, they did until it got to the Supremes, and it was surprising. However, the Universal Service Fund is seriously misnamed because it doesn't live up to what it's supposed to be doing. The money is supposed to be spent on getting universal service, but a huge hunk of the money, probably 2/3 of what's going to not affordability, but to getting service everywhere, is utter and total waste and goes as a subsidy to companies that don't need it. It's been a political football since you and I 30 years ago got into this business. There's small phone companies left around the country, about 4,000 of them. And because most of them are rural areas, the rural senators and congressmen strongly support them. The companies have managed to set a very corrupt system that results in a level of subsidy probably 2 to 3 times higher than what we're required to provide the service. It's just government giveaway to owners of phone companies and some local cooperatives.
But Dave, there
So,
doesn't seem to be any trickle down, even though they're subsidizing these companies. There doesn't seem to be a trickle down to the consumers in terms
well,
of.
that's a separate. That's why I said that not about affordability.
Mhm.
The money is not does not have any requirement of affordability in it. It's just handed to the companies who spend money for what they claim is the money necessary to keep servers up there. And all the economists, including a couple of good ones who's ever looked at it, and everybody inside in Washington knows they're claiming far more money than is needed for that purpose. So, what you're saying, and I agree with, is we have to make things affordable. But kicking more money to the companies that, as you say, is not getting to the people in terms of affordability is not the way to do it. Getting rid of the essentially corrupt system that's overpaying a handful, well, a relative handful of companies is the way to keep the costs down. Uh, Not what the other part of this is about is the phone companies trying to get this as a tax on the internet. Phone companies have been wanting to get money out of Google and Facebook and Microsoft and so on, at least since 1999. That was the first time I wound up in an argument about this. And that's buried inside this. They're saying there's not enough money. Well, we'll tell you where to get it. Google's making a lot of money and they're not giving anything to us.
Right.
And that's behind there. So, like lots of things in Washington, they talk in euphemisms and they hide what they really mean. There is nothing, well, not nothing, but nearly nothing ever has been suggested as a subsidy for companies that somehow wasn't presented by the lobbyist as helping the consumer. That's part of one of the first things you learn in lobbying. You're not trying to get money for the people paying you. You're trying to help the consumers. And, well, we can laugh out loud at this.
Yeah, for real. That's it. It's a joke. It's a joke.
Okay, we got next one.
Now the FCC has come out with some other rulings recently regarding minimum requirements for broadband. They fill us in on that.
Yeah, uh, I believe this is 9/10 correct, actually, even though it's coming from conservative Republicans who don't want to spend money on poor people. Why? The debate here is whether or not a subsidy should be given to get the internet up to a gigabit or a requirement made on the companies to do it. Doesn't need a government subsidy in most cases. And a whole lot of people think that since the internet is good, a faster internet is much better. But still, unless you're doing heavy downloads, how often do you use more than 50 megabits?
Not very often, Dave. Some of the stuff that we're doing now, we're doing uploads of streaming content. So the upload speed has become more important than it used to be in the past, but nowhere near a gigabit. I mean, I don't think I've ever come close to using that up or down.
So in this case, we have the pro-consumer folks, the progressive folks, people like you and me in politics, arguing we got to get this great internet to everybody. It's got to be a gigabit. Well, if people aren't going to use it, that's not going to help people very much at all. And it's just confusion because all the policy in Washington and most of the things you hear about the Washington policy, including the New York Times, are people who don't understand the technology in the first place. How many of the people running the FCC in the last 25 years have been technologists?
I don't know the number, but from, just
Yes, you
my
do.
bird's eye view,
Well, there haven't
yeah,
been any.
few, few,
None.
none. Wow,
None.
wow, Dave, that's a big
And
one.
in fact, Jessica Rosenworcel, who later on went to become the chief of the FCC, agreed with me in 2008 when
Mm,
I said at least one of the people in the FCC should have a technical background
yeah.
or at least understand what's going on. Didn't happen. Still hasn't happened. So we get a lot of people and a lot of arguments that make no sense if you understand the technology.
Mhm.
That is an argument that is used not unreasonably to saying that government regulation is not never going to get it right. It gets a lot of things wrong like this. And in this case, it's our progressive friends that get it wrong. However, it's important to know that Elon Musk, Starlink, can only get up to about 100 megabits and much download and much less to that on the upload.
Just for
So,
folks who may not know what the numbers are, a gig is 1,000 megabits. Is that right, Dave?
yep, just about.
Okay.
Yeah,
So ten times what
go
Starlink does.
1024, but let's not be nitpicking. Uh, and so that this requirement comes out in order to allow the government to buy Starlink or tell people they should buy the 3 times as expensive Starlink uh, to help Elon Musk. Is that
Oh,
why
okay.
they're doing
Now I
this?
see what you're saying, Dave. So it's a maneuver to permit Musk's much slower speed to be out there in the marketplace as a viable option, in particular, one that the government can spend money on.
Well, that's one of the impacts. I don't know what's happening in Washington lately. I've only been down there once in the last 15 years
Mm-hmm.
because I had really been bummed out by a lot of the things that were going on. And I threw up my hands after the broadband stimulus didn't produce more broadband.
Yeah, that was quite a disappointment, and that was under Obama. Very disappointing. But
Yep.
that's another story, Dave. Go ahead.
And the
So
people who did
I just
that,
want to frame, the story that you just brought to our attention that the FCC is proposing to nix the long-term requirement for gigabit internet speed, and that is tied into Elon Musk and his satellite service, which runs at a much slower speed. So that's an interesting relationship going on there. And I guess you would just kind of, I think you were saying your take was that consumers are kind of on the wrong side of this, pushing for 1 gigabit requirement when in fact there's not a lot of evidence that that is really going to improve folks' service.
there's nothing wrong with a gigabit. And maybe in 15 years from now, people will need it more when we're all living in the holodeck and we have to connect our holograms
Hmm.
to other people's holograms. It's not really necessary now, and it's certainly not necessary to spend $30,000 per home of your taxpayer money to get to a gigabit when they could have had 100 megabits without that. And again, some of it is the rural people were going for everything they could get. Uh, but it wasn't good policy to demand a gigabit because we don't need a gigabit. The only people there, about 98% of the people, or 98% of the time, people use the internet. You don't need more than 100 megabits unless you're moving really big files. If you're doing a lot of video, like Jenny is, it helps. But there are not many people who
It's
are
just not
professional
just a few
videographers.
years ago, 25 megabits was qualified as broadband under the FCC's definition. That was less than 5 years ago, maybe 3 or 4 years ago.
And when raising it, it should have been raised up to 100
Hmm.
down, 20 up, or 100 down, 50 up,
Hmm.
because there are some limits on the upstream. But insisting to go to a gigabit, actually, the conservatives were right to criticize it, even though that's not why they criticized it. I can't prove that they were doing this for Elon Musk, uh, because I haven't been going down to Washington much. I still have some friends there. Some of them still read me, but
Okay,
typical
well,
thing worth mentioning, we need some people making these decisions who actually know what they're talking about.
yeah, that would be refreshing, Dave. That would be
Yep.
refreshing.
And you know the people I'm talking about, they're many of them, like Jessica, are very hardworking, very smart, totally oriented to do the best for the consumer. But with few exceptions, they haven't learned enough of the technology and they
Hmm.
think they can figure it out because of their law school degrees.
Well, in addition to the technical deficiencies from most of those bureaucratic folks. I also think there's a lack of will, Dave. You talked about, the Universal Service Fund purportedly there to help low-income folks, poor people who couldn't afford service. I think that will has dissipated within the federal government. The ACP, Affordable Connectivity Program, under the Biden administration, I believe that's when it was instituted, I thought was an incredible step in the right direction to provide a subsidy so that low-income folks could essentially get uh, $30, in some cases free internet service because of the subsidy. What did it run for? 3 years, maybe 2.5 years? And then the political will evaporated. So, I don't see the political will there over and above the technology capabilities or the technology acumen of the bureaucrats. I don't see the political will there to really provide affordable service for poor people.
Although I was on a seminar with Donald Trump's first NTI leader who agreed with me and applauded the Universal Service Fund getting the internet to everybody by dealing with the affordability crisis.
Hmm.
There was COVID out there.
Right.
And even conservative Republicans, as I say, he was the first appointed by Donald Trump to lead the relevant agency, said, we have to solve the problem for poor people. These guys are not usually monsters. They want to do right. They have a strong bias against, against a lot of things that we're in favor of. But many of them have recognized how the real stuff and try to help. Most of the Republicans, conservatives I've met at the FCC, especially Kevin Martin, are at least as ethical as any of their critics. They have a big bias that maybe is leading them to doing a lot of things wrong. And many of them, like some of the Democrats, are heavily affected by the hundreds of millions of dollars spent every year by the phone companies lobbying, and they're good at it. I learned all about. I learned what I know about lobbying by watching Verizon and AT&T. They had the masters. But what's our next story?
Well, we're just about coming up on the break time, Dave. There's a bunch going on with facial recognition technology, in particular, stuff that ICE is doing that is pretty frightening in terms of just stretching the bounds of constitutionality. And NYPD is involved in that as well, in terms of going after pro-Palestinian student protesters and some other issues around that. So I want to talk about that when we come back. But right now we have to take a brief break. So
Who are we?
we are WHCR Harlem Community Radio, and this is Dave Burstein and Stu Reed on community and technology. So stay tuned. We will be right back after a brief musical break. Okay, we're back. Community and Technology with Dave Burstein and Stu Reed. Dave, I ran across a couple of interesting pieces. We've talked in the past about facial recognition technology and how suspect it is and how it's not very, very reliable. And in particular, how it makes a lot of mistakes around Black folks, Black women in particular. But it seems like its uses has really stepped up. In particular, a story about ICE having a new mobile app, something called Mobile Fortify app that ICE is using to out in the field for facial recognition and contactless fingerprints. So they're taking photographs of people, photographs apparently of people's hands. I don't know what contactless fingerprinting is, but they are out in the field with a portable device, with their phones, with this app on their phones, and they are taking pictures and then sending the data into a huge database that DHS maintains and interconnected with other databases as well. And it's AI enhanced data. For the algorithmic matching of patterns, facial, fingerprints, etc. They even are using something we've talked about before, and that is people's gait. That is the way that they walk, the way that they move. They're recording that as
Why
well and
why
putting
is that
that in.
important, Stu?
Huh?
Why is that important? Well, when you can't see their face because they're walking away from you,
Right. Yeah, there you go. There you go. Well, I might not be able to see their face, but that's the way they move, and that is that person. So there are a lot of legal questions, Dave. ICE is doing this stuff with these mobile devices, and they seem to be stretching out where they're going. They're going into places of work and community organizations and places where normally, you don't have this type of a police intrusion, but they are going and collecting this data. And, it's looking like they are, there's a whole international database, Dave, that DHS is tied into. And, it's kind of scary just looking at the scope of where this stuff is going. As they penetrate deeper into communities, as they involve more and more databases, around the world. There's some database called IDENT and another one called Homeland Advanced Recognition Technology, HART, which is the one that also does, in addition to fingerprints and facial images, it does iris in your eyes, and gait patterns. And all of these analytics are culled and put into this, like I said, international database. And it's probably unconstitutional. It has not been challenged. Um, one of the things that did come out is the DHS, Department of Homeland Security, did do an audit last year, and they found that 73% of the mobile devices allowed employees to install unsecured high-risk apps, including those sourced from China and Russia and other adversarial nations. So there's very little regulation of how these apps work or how they are used. And so far, they have not really been challenged in the courts. I'm talking about ICE now and their use of this mobile app, Mobile Fortify. Has not been challenged, but they're pushing. I, one of the stories calls it biometric policing, and they're pushing that out into the streets of America, under the guise of, immigrant ICE enforcement.
now
And
how
who
does the
knows
New York
where it's going
Police
to stop and where it's
Department
going to lead.
use this?
Say it again, Dave.
How does the New York Police Department use this? There's actually
Well, the New York Police
regulations
Department
against
is
the state that they
supposedly is prohibited from using this, but they found a backdoor way to do it. They are using the fire department, who is using these technologies to surveil. And then the NYPD goes to the fire department and gets the data from the fire department. And the one good thing is it's come under scrutiny. It's been talked about, and the city council has been made aware of it. There's something in New York City that the city council approved last in April of this year to strengthen something called the Post Act, which helps curtail the use of this surveillance technology by the NYPD. But like I said, they're backdooring it. They're going to the fire department and using the fire department, which apparently does not come under this Post Act regulation. And Council member Jennifer Gutierrez, who we've had on this show, she's the chair of the technology committee. She's quoted as saying, I'm reading a quote from her, "What happened here is a warning shot. Without clear checks and oversight, city agencies are using powerful surveillance tools like facial recognition and AI with no accountability, no transparency, and no regard for due process." So, I don't know if I want to call it rogue behavior, but it's borderline rogue behavior, Dave. When you have
Oh, God.
federal and
No
municipal
borderline
agencies
about it
out there using this
whatsoever.
technology to surveil U.S. citizens.
We live in a surveillance state, and when I say no borderline, I had a friend that I knew because he was involved building broadband networks. But before that, he had been in the Secret Service.
Mhm.
And about 2007, they persuaded him to come back to the Secret Service to do their technical work. And he said he couldn't tell me what he's actually working on, but this is what he was willing to say. You know all those things that we couldn't do because they're regulations? Well, after 9/11, we can do all of them. That's a direct quote.
Yeah, that was incredible, man. The way that was used to just unleash all kinds of surveillance technology, and I mean it happened in the financial sectors. All of a sudden, the banking regulations got changed. You couldn't do things at banks. Just so much got opened up to the feds and to law enforcement to regulate and monitor and surveil as a result of 9/11. Very, very sad. I don't want to get crazy and start talking about any conspiratorial aspects of that, but it certainly served law enforcement in an incredible way that happened. And the reaction to that really just exacerbated our surveillance, state surveillance, and the just the state oversight thumb on the backs, if you will, of everyday people. Um, I don't know if you agree with that, Dave, but it sounds like your friend did. It sounds like your friend was saying that all kind of stuff we couldn't do before, now we can do because of the threats that we have from overseas and from all around us. So I mean, to me, it's using the scaredy cat, you know, big bad wolf. We've got to surveil, we've got to like watch everybody, we've got to collect data on everybody, and we're really moving towards and then with this guy that we have in the current administration, we're really moving towards a totalitarian police state, in my view. And this is not a political show. This is a community a technology show, but we're talking about how technology is being used to monitor, surveil, and control the population.
Do you think the United States is doing it as well as the Chinese?
Probably not. I think you got to do like the NYPD is doing here. You got to kind of sneak around in the states because we still have some constitutional and legal protections. I think perhaps the Chinese don't have those same protections, so it may be worse over there. But you're more of an expert on it. How's China dealing with this?
Well, we're getting closer and closer, but the Chinese do it really well
Mhm.
and even more persuasive. But looking at what they're doing in China, and remember, China is doing other things in a much more benevolent way than our government is. China is very consciously trying to raise the poor standard of living of the poor people. And that's not happening here in the United States. But it shows us what could be done when you look at what China has done. Everything is monitored there. Unlike, say, when you're when you're at the Columbia University campus in our neighborhood, 15 blocks south of where the show goes out from City College. Columbia just suspended 70 students, and they now have a rule on Columbia campus that you can be suspended for wearing a Halloween mask.
Really?
Some of the demonstrators, in order to avoid the facial recognition, have uh, started wearing masks. That's why the gate stuff is so important. And a number of states have made it illegal to wear a mask at a demonstration. And other states, including New York, want to make it illegal for the ICE enforcers to wear a mask, which they do.
Yeah.
There's story and
To
story
me,
about
that is
ways.
so scary, Dave, that you have the so-called police, if you will, are masked. I mean, that's that. Wow. I mean, why do you have to hide? I mean, that's to me, that's just so antithetical. You're supposed to be the so-called good guys enforcing the common good for folks, and you got to hide behind a mask. That's unconscionable to me.
And the Councilwoman Gutierrez has actually put in a bill in on that. Uh, and good for her. We should invite her back to the show. We've had her here before.
Mhm.
Uh, the Nobody has been more articulate in all of this than Cory Doctorow.
Yeah, what's
Cory
he got to say?
Doctorow. Well, Cory Doctorow worked for the Electronic Freedom Foundation. He's involved in many of the most important activist issues in the world. But his day job is as a very successful novelist. Three of his books were about a forensic accountant called Martin Hench, who gets involved in things that are going on, finds out why they're ugly, including what ugly things the government is doing, and covers all of these kinds of civil liberties issues in a way that reminded me of Jonathan Swift, who wrote Gulliver's Travels. Brilliant, brilliant set of books by Cory. And he knows what side he's on. In one of his books, he had all his characters put stones in their shoes. Why do you think they did that?
Will certainly decrease their mobility.
But it also changed their gait enough to fool the gate detectors.
Ah, okay, we're back to that.
So if you're at a
Okay.
state where you think the police are looking from behind you and walking how you walk to figure out who you are, put some rocks in your shoes. Little ones, please. That can really hurt. Corey's Martin Hench. This is Cory Doctorow, Martin Hench. Uh, this, one of them is called Picks and Shovels. A really fine one he did is Red Team Blues. And another was called The Beazle. They all are brilliant satire that brings up all the civil liberties issues you can imagine. Somebody who has more depth on them than I do or you do,
So
even though
these are
we cover
novels.
them
These are
all.
novels, Dave, or they're nonfiction?
They're very much novels. They are fascinating, often very funny novels. They're all satire. And he, let me just say, it's really good. I'll read you some of the stuff he wrote. But we only have a little bit of time left, I think.
We got about 5 minutes, so go ahead and give us a couple of pieces briefly.
No, I'm going to give them next week because I'm going to bring them up and uh, quote them on the air. Although he did one of the things I can remember, I don't remember the exact words, although I should. But he quoted in two of his novels that, and I'm paraphrasing, but next week I'll bring you the exact words, that when a government no longer follows the will of the people and supports the need of the people, the people have a right and an obligation to rise up against it. Now, I
It sounds
paraphrase
like
that.
the Constitution or Declaration of Independence. What one
It's
of those
about
documents uses that very language.
from the United States Constitution.
Hmm.
And of course, well, let me take the last 2 minutes to start a story that maybe I'll finish up last night.
Okay.
In an era that was very different, the late 60s and early 70s, I had to make a decision on this. Martin Luther King had been shot. The war in Vietnam was killing people by the millions. And some of the people I knew decided to go underground and forcefully resist the government. One of them I knew was Louis Wasser, worked with me. We both earned part of our living doing this fly-by-night moving company. One day, woke up, went into the office, and he was on the front page of the New York Times. His real name was David Gilbert. He was one of the people involved in the Brinks robbery, where a policeman was shot
Yeah,
as
I
they were
remember that.
trying to raise funds for the revolution. I had met him and his girlfriend and their baby. And David is still in jail. Still, we're talking 50 years later. Every so often, something comes out about what he was doing, organizing inmates to get treatment for AIDS, things like that. That's the kind of person he was. He was a very good, gentle person. Other people I knew made that same decision. Lewis, I didn't know who Lewis was and didn't know his history until he
Yeah,
showed up on.
those are crazy times, Dave. I was a college student at the same time, and there was a lot of violence in the streets, both from the police as well as from folks who were demonstrating against the system. And so, yeah, a
Did
lot of folks
Lewis
had to make
dissolve?
decisions as to how they were going to deal with that. So, but bring it home. What were you saying about your response, and how does that relate to what we're
Well,
talking about?
so I made the decision not to use violence. And I still think that was the right decision. But some of the people who made a different decision when they thought the government had lost the mandate of the people included George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, John Adams, and people like that too. Uh,
Yeah, genesis of the American Revolution for sure.
yeah,
Hmm.
and there's way more to where the American Revolution came from. It had a whole lot to do not just with the taxes that they were putting on without representation, which is what I learned in elementary school, but the fact that several of the people, including John Adams, were heavy duty smugglers to avoid customs duties, and the British were trying to intercept them for
Yeah,
that.
what were they smuggling, Dave?
I'm sorry?
What were they smuggling?
Well, the one we know best is tea.
Okay.
It's part of the Boston Tea Party.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Many of those people who disguised themselves as Indians went into Boston Harbor and dumped in the harbor hundreds of thousands of dollars worth, or hundred thousand pounds worth of tea being brought in by the British East India Company. Uh, Happened also to be bringing in tea themselves, just not paying the duties on it.
Mm. Mhm. Wow.
But the question of whether you raise up and how you do it is something that people I knew made one decision. And I, admiring those people for their courage, decided to stay nonviolent. But hell, when you read the New York, when you get, as I did today, see the new headlines about 15 people starving to death in the Israeli American invasion of Gaza. It makes you so
It
angry
makes you want to do
that
something, Dave. Makes you want to do
you can
something.
understand why some people decided to
Yeah,
fight it
yeah.
by any means necessary.
Right, sure. Okay,
You know
well,
that,
just
right?
David, yeah, yeah, Malcolm X. Yeah, I understand that. We're just about out of time. You had a kicker you wanted to close out with. What was that, Dave?
I had some funny ones, but let me give you the one possible that actually matters. Trump has just pulled us out of UNESCO, the United Nations, I don't know, whatever. Once upon a time, kids like me used to go trick or treating for UNICEF,
Hmm.
which was the Emergency Children's Fund. I actually have been involved in a lot of the international politics. I go to ITU meetings and things like that. So I actually got to learn a lot about what the different organizations do. The bulk of what UNESCO does is try to feed and support poor and hungry people, children in particular. That is what is unacceptable to the United States government we have.
No longer
And
the American way, Dave. No longer the American way. It's a shame.
how many people haven't died of AIDS in Africa the last 2 decades? The
I have no.
number is in the hundreds of thousands and maybe in the millions.
Mhm.
Because the medicine for AIDS was discovered in the 1990s. It was being sold at ridiculous prices, thousands upon thousands, tens of thousands of dollars. And there were very few people in Africa who could afford it. I know that people I knew worked very hard. People I had joined in a die-in, lying down in front of the White House to show, to get people to understand what was happening with AIDS. And as I say, I've come to know a lot of conservative Republicans and disagree with them a whole lot of things. But hundreds of thousands of lives in Africa, maybe more. The epidemic was unreal, especially in South Africa. In some countries, 30% of the population was infected with HIV because George Bush, conservative Republican, made the decision that the United States government would support the Africans and provide money to get them AIDS
Well, we're
treatment.
seeing a total reversal of that policy, not just for AIDS, but U.S. Aid to foreign countries, medical and scientific support is being pulled left and right. So, we just gotta fight what we can, Dave, and understand that this current administration, does not have the best interests of the world at heart and in heart, and as far as I'm concerned. And we just got to keep pushing and fighting, and as we do on this show, bring it to people's attention what's going on, so that we can at least be informed about where we are and how we stand in the world.
This show is about technology, but technology sometimes informs what's happening in the world.
Yeah.
And the show is about community. So we're going to go back and forth on artificial intelligence
Hmm.
and all kinds of things like that.
Okay.
But we're not going to hide some of the impacts on our community.
Yeah, we can.
Here it is.
Okay, there you have it. This has been Community and Technology. Dave Burstein and Stu Reed on WHR 90.3 FM, the voice of Harlem. Every Wednesday, 5 p.m. Tune in. You just might learn something. Thanks. Good night.